really appreciate that insight, Professor Dershowitz, and that's a great segue into the question that I have from our platinum sponsor, Americans for Prosperity. They'd like to hear from you more about the challenges with higher education. It seems to them and to us that we no longer have a culture that encourages academic freedom, freedom of thought, freedom of speech. Is this reversible? And if so, how? Because you've been fighting this battle at Harvard for years.
I was fighting it since I was in elementary school, and my rabbis wouldn't let me speak out critically. So now I've been fighting against oppression of free speech. I don't know if it's reversible. It's very difficult. The dean of social sciences at Harvard, a very decent man, the dean of social sciences at Harvard recently wrote an op-ed piece in the Harvard Crimson in which he said, we have much too much free speech on university campuses, and professors and students shouldn't be free to criticize the administrations and shouldn't feel free to tell alumni that Harvard is doing things wrong because it will hurt Harvard if they know the truth. This is the dean of social sciences at Harvard. We had to form a group at Harvard called basically the lobby group for free speech at Harvard. Who would imagine you'd need a special group to support free speech at a university like Harvard? But it is true. And I think a lot of parents are making decisions, and kids are making decisions now to have their young people go to different colleges. I think the Ivy Leagues have justifiably suffered over the years. I think more students are going to Vanderbilt and Emory and other places in Texas and in the South and University of Florida. And I don't know enough about the situation up here, but I do know that Harvard and Yale and Princeton don't have a monopoly on learning and education. And if I was starting out a career now as a teacher, I think I'd be more inclined to take a job at one of these other universities. Look, I was educated at Brooklyn College, which was a free city school, mostly for immigrant kids. And we really learned a lot there. And we had great professors and great students. And I just think that we have to broaden the base of American education and fight back against this attempt to impose a straitjacket on thought. We now have professors who are arguing that free speech is a patriarchal, colonial, imperialist way of keeping people down. You know, it's the marketplace of ideas. Winston Churchill said about democracy what I would say about free speech, the worst form of governance ever, except for all the others that have been tried over time. And what's the alternative to free speech? Having the dean of the social sciences tell us what we can say? No, let that be judged by the market.
So another question from our platinum sponsor,
Sure.
Americans for Prosperity. We've seen a lot going on in the tension, if you will, we talked about this a little bit earlier today, between the bureaucrats in the alphabet agencies that make up the executive branch, Congress, and the courts. So we wanted to ask you specifically, what do you think of the balance of power right now between those groups of people, and do you think the system of checks and balances is working the way that it is intended to work by the law?
It isn't working that way, and I think we're about to see a revolution. I do think the Supreme Court will decide, maybe tomorrow, maybe Monday, maybe Tuesday next week, and if not now, in the near term, that administrative agencies hurt the system of checks and balances rather than help it. You know, you hear words about the unitary executive as if that's some fascist plot. That's what the Constitution provided. 3 branches of government. The third branch, the executive branch, is headed by one person, the President of the United States, who's elected in a duly appropriate manner. And the President gets to control the executive branch. He can delegate authority to administrative agencies, and Congress, within limits, can delegate its authority to administrative agencies. But what we're seeing is the Supreme Court saying, don't assume that Congress or the President has delegated those powers. You have to have proof that they have Otherwise, the power remains within the branch that had the power to set up the agencies in the first part. So I think we're going to see a revolution. I think we're seeing a change. There's tradition, too. Take, for example, the issue of the Justice Department. The Justice Department is simply an agency of the executive. The president could, theoretically, decide who to prosecute, who not to prosecute. Thomas Jefferson decided to prosecute Aaron Burr. Not only that, he got his cousin to do the prosecution, and he got his other cousin to be the judge, John Marshall. Talk about targeting people. I mean, Aaron Burr, tried to steal the presidency from Thomas Jefferson in the 1800 election. It's so important to understand that you just can't tell the president that his power is limited because we want it to be limited. There's a tradition in the Justice Department. Look, the framers of the United States Constitution made a mistake, and the early Judiciary Act made a mistake. Almost every other country in the world divides the functions of the Justice Department into two. The Attorney General has a schizophrenic role, which is impossible to perform. From 9 to 12 every day, he is the political advisor of the president, whose job it is to help the president get reelected, to be a loyal member of the cabinet. That's the job of the Attorney General. Then there's a lunch break, and from 1 to 4 or 1 to 5, his job is to decide who to prosecute. Objectively, neutrally, not to benefit the president. So that's why we have special counsel. Other countries don't have special counsel. England doesn't have special counsel, special prosecutors. Why? They have a full-time director of public prosecution, which is outside the political sphere. Same thing is true with Israel. The Attorney General of Israel, the prosecutors are not part of the government. Look who they're prosecuting. They're prosecuting the prime minister. The regular Attorney General of Israel is prosecuting the prime minister. 4 prime ministers have gone to jail in Israel. I know I visited one of them. I represented one of them, Ehud Olmert. When I visited him in prison, he was being guarded by a young Arab guard, and I created a joke as a result of my visit to the prime minister of Israel in his prison. The joke was, when you ask a prime minister for his cell number, it's not necessarily his telephone. And so his Omer's cell number was 8. There he was, serving time. A president of Israel went to prison as well. And now the International Criminal Court is trying to prosecute Israeli prime ministers because they don't think Israel has a good enough judicial system. Well, I'm helping to represent Prime Minister Netanyahu in this case. I spoke to him yesterday. I spoke to him the day before. And today we had a big victory in the case. Great Britain, to its credit, I don't know if it'll continue because Great Britain now has a conservative government, which is generally fairly fair to Israel. But the Labour Party is about to win, and the Labour Party is very anti-Israel. But the current Great British government has asked the International Criminal Court today to file an amicus curiae brief claiming that the International Criminal Court has no jurisdiction over Israel because Israel has a fair judicial system and under what's called a special rule that requires that the court defer to the local jurisdiction if they have a legitimate investigative power. The Great Britain has said that that should be the rule, and the International Criminal Court has no jurisdiction. I will be filing a brief along similar lines as well. And so, we live in interesting times. So much is going on. It's a great time to be a lawyer. I think, I'm 85 years old, and I've never had more fun practicing law and being involved in so many different things. I just hope the good Lord gives me the strength and the power with the help of my wife and family to continue to do this for years.